It is about 11, and so I'm going to start the presentation. And wanted to first move into some introductions. So if I can get my PC to do this. There we go. I'm here with two other people. Valerie King Bailey. She's the CEO of OnShore Technology Group, and she's an expert in validation and especially around the ERP systems. Tim Holmquist is principal of ERP Solutions, and he's a quality standards expert. So Tim has been in hundreds of companies with in terms of enhancing their ability to support their quality processes inside an ERP system. And I'm Mike Hull. I'm General Manager for eBECS North America, and we are the Lean ERP people. So our objective today is really not going to be a demo, and I'm hoping that you got that from everything that you saw in the invitations. We're here to talk about the issues that are involved in deploying an ERP solution inside of medical device manufacturing. Everybody will be on silent mode, and so you will not be able to ask questions verbally, but I've got my email address there, and if you could shoot me a note if you have a question, that would be great. And then what we'll do is we'll try to work that in someplace in our presentation. Some people are not able to use the chat window feature inside of GoToMeeting, and I've just had that in the past. So we've settled on using this email feature. So I've got somebody monitoring my email. So just shoot me a note, and we'll get your question answered. The other thing is just a basic housekeeping detail here is that you all are on silent mode, so we should not have a problem with anybody being able to come into the conversation. But if for any reason you are and you hear something in the background, if you can just put yourself on mute, that would be helpful. So let's get into the webinar. So the agenda for today is we're going to just take a very quick overview of the ERP concept and why med device manufacturing ERP is different. Then we're going to jump over to Tim to talk about quality issues and what has to be considered inside of a med device manufacturer in terms of quality. I'm going to talk a little bit about lean process support, not to say that everybody here is on a lean journey, but for those that are, we're going to talk a little bit about lean process support issues inside of ERP. And then we're going to jump over to Val, and Valerie's going to be talking about FDA validation issues and how that all works together in ERP. And then what we'll do is we'll finish with a final slide just in terms of where in the world do you discuss all these issues when you're going to deploy an ERP solution, and we'll have Q&A. Obviously, during the whole presentation, please ask questions. Like I mentioned before, just send it to that email address that you saw there to begin with. So let's talk a little bit about objectives in implementing ERP solutions. And these are kind of generic, but inside the med device manufacturing world, it's almost a pay-to-play kind of thing. It's really an entry requirement. You really kind of need an ERP solution to be able to play. Most people are looking for one version of the truth. A lot of companies have purchased or acquired a number of companies, or they have a best of breed approach where they have a number of things integrated. They reach a certain size, and this whole idea of multiple companies or a best of breed approach, it just doesn't yield that one version of the truth that you need to have to run a business. Another issue that people or an objective people want to achieve in terms of implementing ERP is to create one system of contiguous processes. And this gives you that one look and feel across the whole enterprise, but all the processes relate to each other. When something is integrated, you always have this problem of you've got information flowing from one place in one format coming to something in another place that requires another format, and the system integrity sometimes is at issue. And especially as we get into Valerie's part of the whole thing, system integrity is absolutely essential. Another objective is to support continuous improvement, and obviously we're all looking for that competitive advantage, and so we're all looking to take our processes as they are today, make some changes to them, monitor the metrics in those processes, and see if they've actually improved our processes. So to support continuous improvement, having an ERP solution that looks across the whole enterprise, it's a big component of that. So that's another objective. And then as companies just get larger, you have people moving different places in the company, to have the same look and feel company-wide on the business support system becomes really important in terms of training cost and getting people up to speed in different capacities inside the enterprise. And then lastly, supporting geometric growth. You have a lot of companies that are growing by merger and acquisition, and to be continually taking on additional ERP solutions, it just becomes pretty onerous. And so having one solution that when an acquisition is made, that new company can be brought into the enterprise very quickly on a global set of processes with a minimal amount of localization and customization for that new entity, that's absolutely key to a growth strategy. So those are some of the essential objectives in implementing ERP. There are others that you probably can think of, but those are the biggies. And obviously the first one there is why we're here talking today, is that an ERP solution is really an entry level requirement for medical device manufacturing. Let's see if I can get to the next slide here. A typical ERP content. I'm assuming that most of you do have an ERP solution, but sometimes people have started with something that's fairly old, and maybe all of it's not. Maybe the ERP solution is not as comprehensive as most are today. But if you take a look at this, you have the core in the blue, and so ERP solutions will have all kinds of manufacturing process support, project accounting, distribution. There's probably some kind of an enterprise portal, an ability to get into the thing through the internet, HRM, payroll systems, financial management, CRM. Your whole supply chain can be inside of the ERP solution, and then naturally a layer of analytics and BI. And generally from this core, most ERP solutions then have verticalized where there are special processes that have to be taken into account for different vertical markets. So for instance, inside of life sciences, the whole idea of serialization, batch control, traceability, those are extremely important things, and in med devices it's just as important. And so the ERP solution maybe will have been verticalized to be able to take into account those kinds of processes. And then aerospace and defense is its own little world. And so what ends up happening is you take this core and you verticalize in a number of different businesses that you kind of specialize in. So, but the core, it looks like that. And and then you go to verticalization from there. So typical ERP content, just wanted to touch on that for a couple of seconds, but it is a holistic system. It should all be in one code base, all operating on one set of tables, which is usually quite a few tables, numbering in the thousands. So typical ERP content. Medical device challenges, though. In terms of ERP, it just adds another level of complexity to everything, it seems, and I'm probably telling you things that you already know. But in addition to what normally has to be done in an ERP implementation, actually in selecting an ERP solution and then implementing it, is that a lot of medical device manufacturers have multiple models. So whereas somebody who's making a Dell PC has a specific set of processes that probably are maybe make to stock or make to order, a lot of times med device, you may be making a highly engineered product. You may have some make to stock items that go with that. You may actually have semiconductors that go into that, and if you're making those yourself, that's a whole nother model. And then you may have disposables and things that have to be replaced periodically, and maybe those things are made more in a process manufacturing model. So med device challenge there is that whereas a lot of businesses just stick with one model, a lot of times med device manufacturers have numerous models. The other thing is that on top of everything, you've got your business issues, but then you have quality issues and you got regulatory issues. And a lot of times those are kind of quality is on steroids in a sense, regulatory issues are on steroids. And so you've just got to go to another level, and that presents another challenge. So, Tim's going to talk a little bit more about the quality later, but, you're building an item that goes into the human body or affects the human body and comes underneath that FDA control and quality standards. And then lastly there, if you are on a lean journey, a lot of people on your lean team may be asking the question, how in the world are you going to put an ERP solution into our visual environment? So it's kind of like lean ERP. Are you kidding? and you got to get all of it to work in one ERP solution. So medical device manufacturing, and when you're starting to look at ERP solutions, it's got its own set of challenges. So at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Tim Holmquist, and he's going to bring us into the first set of challenges, and that's around quality. And so, Tim, I'm going to pass it off to you, and I'll be running the keyboard, so you'll hear Tim telling me to change the slides periodically. So, Tim, take it away.
Okay, great. Thanks. Mike, you can hear me okay, I take it?
We can hear you well.
Okay. My name is Tim Holmquist, and I'm going to talk about some of the challenges in the FDA market, or actually in the regulated industries market for quality management. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Mike. And our company was founded in 1995. We began focus on a product called Microsoft Dynamics AX in 1998. And our market focus is in the quality management for regulated industries. And this is in the quality area and the product engineering. And when we talk about regulated industries, this really is directed more towards medical device companies, companies in aviation, automotive, as well as into nuclear industry. This is a chart I do like to show. It's a cumulative number of rules that have come into play from our federal government since 1976. And this is published by the Chamber of Commerce. And we look at the first year on the chart, 1976, and it shows new rules that impact business, about 7,400. And if we accumulate those through 2009, that accumulation is up to about 170,000. So we definitely have the challenges when it comes to regulation. Go ahead to the next slide. You can go to, basically the challenge, especially if you're in a paper environment and you're tracking your medical devices, one of the challenges I don't have to explain to you all know is the massive internal paperwork accumulation that you have. And this is going to definitely create some problems with traceability, product recalls, and a lot of times what I see from paper systems is the record accuracy, the accuracy of inspection certificates and so forth. Product controls, if you go back, Mike, you have to go back. Other area, other product controls. You know, what countries are my products approved for? Are we releasing products that haven't been approved in specific countries? Can you produce a DHR, device history record, quickly? From a paper system, extremely challenging. And the big thing is, how was that product built 3 years ago compared to today? Do you have that traceability that as designed, as built, and as shipped? Can you look at those comparisons? So one of the things that an ERP system can bring into first is the electronic control plans. And these can be under revision control. And the type of control plans that you can incorporate into an ERP system, for example, are the ANSI Z1.4, the ISO 2859-1, or the NIST Series 6. And many systems like our own will permit you to customize those. So you may not be following those to a T, but you have the ability to modify those specific plans. One of the big issues that have come up over the past few years is the Title 21 CFR Part 11 standards for electronic signatures and your audit trail. And obviously with an electronic system, you can electronically sign off. If you're familiar with electronic banking, electronic signatures in an ERP system is very similar to online banking, where you incorporate a signature to log into the system to access your account. And in these cases, the inspection plans and electronic signatures can be automatically delivered to the inspector for electronic signature as a part of the manufacturing process, whether that's in the incoming purchase side, in-process manufacturing, or even on the sales side, or even on the service side if you have devices that need to be serviced in the field. Another area tough to maintain, dependent upon the type of products that you market and to who you market through, is the customer complaints. We work with companies that might have a couple people in this area, or they may have 50 people in the customer complaint area, depending upon the type of device that they manufacture. And with electronic customer complaints, it makes your regulatory reporting a lot easier. your search capabilities to look for other instances much easier, and of course your traceability. You can go to the next slide, Mike. ERP systems today are much more friendlier, connecting devices. Like in this picture, we show a digital caliper, and especially with instruments today, they are built for Microsoft products, typically to export to Excel. These can be easily interfaced right into your ERP system to make data collection much easier for the inspection process. Go to the next slide. EDHR, of course, with electronic ERP today, we have what we call the EDHR, the device history record. And this is the state of the device with complete reverse traceability once that device is shipped to a customer, whether it's a bandage, whether it's some type of medical scanner. And through an ERP system, we can automatically collect these records from all the quality, all the production processes, and give complete traceability, reverse traceability, all the way back to the raw materials to where that raw materials were purchased from. And if you're using a product like Dynamics AX, you can also use a service module, and we can also maintain the status as how that product is maintained. But a good device history record in an electronic system should give you that online reverse traceability, the drill down the transactions, and it should really give it to you from a single control panel. So if I look at the device we've shipped to a customer or servicing to a customer, I should have that capability to go back and completely trace all batch serial numbers as well as quality of production and raw material purchases. Big area is your engineering control. How do we control our bills of material, our products, even our production routes? And one of the things that you want to really look at is do you have good revision control? Does your system produce for you the device master record? What is the state of that product that as we released it from engineering into the production environment, so that we have that comparison to how it was designed, how it was made, how it was shipped. And many systems will give you the capability to have a sandbox, which is an exact duplicate of your production environment where we can model those new designs. And of course, an advantage there, if you're building products where you have your own IP, you want to protect that environment. So through a sandbox, you can incorporate those controls so only those in a need-to-know environment can know about those new products. And you also want to take a look at when you change products. Do you have a method in that you can electronically change those products, and you have that traceability that eventually will go back down to your DHR. And of course, the cost impact analysis that you may have on an engineering change. We may be changing a raw material, but that raw material may be several levels down in the bill of material. What impact does that have on existing inventory, customers in the field, to products that we may be servicing in the field? You can go ahead to the next slide, Mike. The other area, of course, is the CAPA, corrective action, preventative action process, and the non-conforming material process. And a good electronic system should be able to deliver a good CAPA process. Either it's a standard ISO format or perhaps the 8D, the 8 disciplines of CAPA that derive from the automotive industry that many medical device companies use today, or some format to that, a process that gives you the capability to model your CAPA process exactly to the way that your process need to run. And one of the other areas, of course, of a CAPA is you do want to be able to generate those CAPAs automatically from a non-conforming condition, maybe from a customer complaint, or directly from your vendor table, or from inspections. If you're inspecting and you run into an issue during the inspection process, to automatically, quickly, electronically create that CAPA process from there. And of course, that should incorporate the e-signatures and approvals that will meet the Title 21 CFR Part 11 standards. The NCR process and non-conforming process is a condition that we may look at prior to going through the CAPA process. And in this case, we may have a condition on a product or maybe in the shop or with a vendor that we need to disposition that material. And automatically creating those from the inspections will automatically draw all that inspection information into an NCR process. And course, using automatic defect codes based upon the type of failure. If the system can automatically insert that, it's going to improve your accuracy. So the NCR process is the condition of the material or process that we're going to report, disposition the material, and perhaps escalate that to a CAPA if necessary. And then, of course, e-signatures and approvals are going to electronically capture all that information. And this type of information can also be integrated. The CAPA process and the NCR electronically can also be integrated into your device history record, so you have a complete history that we saw non-conforming material, we corrected the condition, and there we have it compatible for the FDA standards. Go to the next slide. Oh, one back. And of course, the product recall. The FDA requires that we can demonstrate that we can do a product recall. In today's environments, we can execute those recalls with one button, and we can take a look at all of our customers, or we can look at the basic raw material that is several levels down. Maybe that's the component of the recall. You know, we can go up and we can take a look at where that raw material was used. We can locate all the customers that went. And if we're running multi-companies, we can also look across companies in case we did transfers across companies. And this should give us the inventory on hand, our production orders, our service orders, even look at the purchase orders that might be impact for this. And then, of course, generating those letters, but one of the challenges in generating a recall is auditing that recall. Do the customer still have that product? If it's a consumable product that might be used, we need to take an audit of that and provide the capability for product returns, replacement, and then, of course, sign off on that recall so we fully document how we handled the recall, who it went to, and then we sign it through closure approvals of a group of individuals to sign off. Next slide. And then, of course, more importantly, variable control charting, Plato charting, your AQL charting, delivery performance charting, all these type of measures in a good ERP system are there so that you can take a look and see, control your quality as you manufacture or as you buy raw materials, as well as to make corrective actions if you run into quality issue. So the digital dashboard to give you that capability is very typical in the ERP systems like Dynamics AX.
All right, great, Tim. Thanks very much. I really appreciate your kind of stepping us through a lot of the major quality issues that somebody really needs to think through as they select an ERP solution and then start to implement it. One question came up is you showed a picture of instrument calibration. You didn't talk too much about it, but can instruments be calibrated in typical ERP solutions, or can
good ERP? Yes, a good ERP system like Dynamics AX incorporates the instrument calibration because that's got to be part of your quality processes. And we can display the state of that instrument before it's used. So it incorporates risk instrument notifications as well as the calibration state of that instrument before you inspect. So you have a notification of that. But we typically find in the implementations we're in, customers are incorporated and they might be using third-party products for their instrument calibration, but just about all the instances, they'll bring those instruments into the ERP because there's so many benefits to that.
Okay, great. One other question, and that had to do with skip lots. Can most ERP solutions handle different forms of skip lots, and if so, what types?
Yeah, most systems I've looked at handle ISO 2859-1 standards where skip lot can be incorporated into it. We also handle the ANSI Z1.4 as well as an S-Series 6, so that we can incorporate the skip lot out of the box, or you can customize the skip lot and as well as customize your tightening, your reducing, and so forth in your inspection standards. So it's totally customizable.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Tim. And if you do have other questions, shoot them over to me at mhull, H-U-L-L, at eBECS, EBECS.com, and we'll slip them in someplace like we just did there. So let's jump over to Lean ERP. Is it an oxymoron or not? and Lean issues to consider inside of an ERP selection and implementation. I wanted to just touch a little bit on what Lean thinking is. Probably a lot of people that are on the webinar today are kind of far along into a Lean journey, but just in case, there's a book called Lean Thinking by Womack and Jones, and they kind of codified, I guess you could say, in the 90s or maybe the late 80s, what Lean thinking is. I think they may have even given it its name. But some of the essentials are that it focuses on, Lean thinking focuses on what the customer values. Anything else is really considered waste. So it's a different way of approaching the problem of what does the customer really want? Why are we doing what we're doing? So it's an overriding principle of Lean is focus on what the customer values. Second is that, and these are things that are going to start getting us into how ERP works and how ERP kind of either collides with or works with Lean thinking. The idea is to arrange productions into cells and to create flow across a production facility. And with that concept, you want to be pulling from specific customer orders. And therefore, you're going to be doing things more in a just-in-time, a JIT kind of way, probably in smaller batches than it used to be. So there's a transformation that happens, and generally things were being made in large batches. And now what's going to happen, principle of Lean thinking, is to get as close to one-piece flow as you possibly can get. So there's actual transition, that's happening here over time, and it takes a couple of years for Lean thinking to really become part of the DNA of an organization. It's not something where you can go out to Amazon, buy the Lean thinking book, and next week, you're a Lean guru. It doesn't work that way. So it takes a couple of years for this to become part of the DNA of an organization. And once it does, it really does kind of oppose ERP and MRP logic. And I'm just going to give you two examples of this. The first is that, generally inventory in traditional manufacturing is considered an asset, so it's an actual value. But customers do not value inventory sitting on the floor, and it costs money to leave it there. So Lean thinking drives inventory out, whereas traditional manufacturing considers it an asset, and that's a direct conflict. Another thing that is more even tied to ERP and MRP is that the planning for those is to generally maximize a workstation. So if you can set that thing up to run for 3 weeks on one particular item or one particular product or component, you do that, whereas Lean is trying to get you to think in terms of fulfilling specific customer orders, getting down to one-piece flow. So this whole idea of planning around batch and queue is very antithetic to Lean. So as you go along your Lean journey, it's very possible that the ERP solution you currently have, or even one that you might be considering, is actually opposed to where you're going. And so what ends up happening is you kind of have a conundrum. You've spent 3 to 5 years of blood, sweat, and tears to simplify things, eliminate wasteful steps, run the operation as simply and visually as possible, try to get toward a one-piece flow, and all that's kind of moving you away from MRP. And then all of a sudden, the powers that be decide that we're going to put in a new ERP solution. And so the question ends up being are they going to approach that from the MRP paradigm, which the ERP vendor probably will? And then the next question is it going to start to add wasteful transactions as I try to put software into places that are entirely visual? Generally, software doesn't work well with visual because visual is simple. It just requires a visual signal to go to the next step. Software tends to want to add wasteful transactions to that. So there's a conundrum there as a company begins to look toward a new ERP solution. To just kind of add a little bit to this, I was at a Lean Accounting Summit last year, and Jean Cunningham's one of the original thinkers in the area of Lean Accounting. She's written 2 books that are up there on the top. One of them has the Easier, Simpler, Faster, actually won a Shingo Prize. And the question on a panel discussion she was involved in is, what ERP system best supports Lean Accounting? And her question was kind of interesting. She reframed the question. She said a better question is, do the people who are going to help you implement ERP really understand what Lean is? because they come from it from their metrics, and they'll implement according to what they know. You've already worked really hard to create pull and create flow and reduce inventory. You don't want your ERP vendor to drive you down traditional paths. So this is a real viable question to ask as you start to move into an ERP selection process and then an implementation process. The question is will ERP really support that? Another question would be, though, what if ERP actually did think differently? What if the product thought differently? What if in the organization of the product, and I've just separated a number of things here into groups. You can see the green categories there of organization. What if the product, the ERP solution, was built around production flow, work cells? What if in the planning and the scheduling, what if the planning and scheduling on the screen was actually a replica of the visual approach to things? What if the product itself supported a number of different types of pull signals that enables you to move material toward a one-piece flow from warehouse to a supermarket via water spider down to staging in a cell area in small amounts? And what if the product actually supported those kinds of things? And then how about costing? What if the ERP product thought differently and organized the whole thing in the whole production area into value streams? And maybe it could roll costing up through the value stream. So, question as you look at a new ERP solution will be, does it think the way that we've begun to think as a lean thinking manufacturer? And, obviously, we're here to tell you that's entirely possible. The other question is can lean processes and traditional processes coexist, and then as we're moving along in our lean journey, transition? Because wherever we are now, that's not where we're going to be a year from now. And so generally our customers end up having some body of lean or some body of items that are produced using lean principles, and then they may have other components, items that are still on an MRP kind of thought process. And obviously we're trying to transition some of those MRP kind of driven items to more of a pull type of situation, but that's going to take time, and so there will be a mix. So the question is in that software that you're going to select to support your business, can both lean and traditional processes coexist? And then is there an easy way to transition them as you move forward in your lean journey? So that's a key question to ask as well. So as you're looking at selecting a product, and as you're looking at deploying a product, and you're looking at putting ERP into a lean manufacturer, here's a couple principles I came up with. Given, lean's a 3 to 5 year transformation, and it really is a transformation of the way you problem solve, the way that you think. So as you move toward a new ERP solution, you don't want to, principle, put a stake in the ground. No steps backwards. You want to bring your lean model front and center in your selection process and then in your implementation process. Make sure everybody understands that software does not lead transformation. Software can support transformation. It can give you the information you need to support your Kaizen type of strategy, but it does not lead transformation. Do no harm to visual environments. Visual, you've gone simple. It's clear what to do next. When you're looking to deploy an ERP solution, make sure it doesn't harm your visual environments. And add no wasteful transactions. Make sure that whatever it takes, you're not adding wasteful transactions to what you're doing. You've taken plenty of time and effort to drive those transactions out. Use software, therefore, where software really does add value. Figure that out and use it where it adds value, because it does. I mean, you can support things inside of a lean environment that are very difficult to support manually, like something like Kanban calculations. Very complex, has to happen on the fly. So software is very good at some things, but only use software where software adds value, and add insight where insight adds value. So for instance, if your product starts at 10 o'clock in the morning and is done at 12, not a whole lot of need to have insight into that. So adding the ability to look into work in process over those 2 hours probably tends to be superfluous. So the work to add that insight is probably wasteful. So add insight where insight adds value. If your medical device takes 2 months and it's highly engineered, it's 2 months on the floor to actually assemble it, test it, and ship it. insight inside of that in terms of work in process is probably pretty important. So figure out a way to do that without harming any visual environments, without adding a lot of wasteful transactions. But insight does add value. And lastly, or second to last, the mix model. Make sure that you can support a mix model inside of your new ERP solution. And then another question would just be, as your, a sales and operations planning system is absolutely essential to keeping your lean environment moving smoothly. So check into what kind of an S&OP type of support system your lean, the different products you're looking at can supply you with. So that's all I have for lean at this point. And again, we're not looking to demonstrate anything today. What we're looking to do is cover some of the issues. So as you're taking a look at new ERP solutions, those are some of the lean issues that you should be thinking about if you are into lean manufacturing. I'm going to pass it off to Valerie King-Bailey at this point. She's going to take us through her thoughts on validation and how that works inside of maybe selecting an ERP solution and then obviously deploying the ERP solution. So Valerie, would you take it away?
Thank you, Mike. I'd be happy to. Good morning, everyone. My name is Valerie King-Bailey. I'm Chief Executive Officer of OnShore Technology Group. We're a group based here in Chicago, and what we do is independent validation and verification consulting, and we also are the authors of the Microsoft Dynamics AX Validation Toolkit. This morning, what I'd like to talk to you about is a continuation of what Mike and Tim have discussed with you today regarding quality and lean ERP systems, but I'd like to talk to you about it in the context of software validation and verification. I'm going to cover two things very quickly with you this morning: how you can apply the principles of software validation to a lean or quality ERP system, number one, and then number two, talk to you a little bit about green validation. When people think of software validation, it's often thought of as a necessary evil. It's something that you have to do. And so a lot of organizations look at the lack of a strategic focus in their compliance initiatives. In other words, companies come at quality and software validation really with no strategic focus to their business initiatives. They think, I have to do it, let's just go validate this system or that system. They also have limited disjointed systems or single point solution systems. So outside of your ERP system, you may have a point solution for quality, for example. You may have a point solution for nonconformance deviation management, a point solution for document management. But as Tim pointed out, all of the elements really do need to come together from a quality perspective to support your ERP initiative, and the same with lean. So as we go through and we look at validation, the reputation is that it's sometimes costly to validate and then thus deploy a system in a highly regulated environment. So how do you get beyond these challenges, and how do you get beyond the compliance is a necessary evil to a return on investment, and looking at compliance or software validation is just a good business practice? And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. Next slide. So when we talk about internal validation challenges, especially surrounding an ERP system, in some cases, depending on how you conduct validation, some have the perception that it is expensive, time-consuming, very document-intensive. The perpetual nature of validation causes some to develop either some business processes that are optimal for validation or some processes that actually extend validation. So how do you determine the right level of validation for your ERP system is really the critical question. Next slide. So I want to go back to the slide that Mike talked about, because what if you thought about ERP differently, especially from a lean manufacturing perspective? One question that I'm often asked is, how much validation due diligence do you have to do? And what Mike and Tim have been discussing with you today is not a bespoke or custom development of an ERP system, but what they've been discussing is a commercial off-the-shelf or COTS implementation of lean and quality ERP. So the question of how much validation due diligence do you need to do, number one, and number two, what do you validate? If you look at this slide, we validate in an ERP system all of the lean manufacturing functionality. So the scope of validation is what you see here. From the beginning process to the end process, it's an integrated test. It's not a feature function test, but it's very integrated test. So if you think of ERP, especially lean manufacturing functionality in this manner, this gives you the scope of validation that you're looking for. Next slide. So again, going back to Mike's slide of what if lean and traditional could coexist, when you look at the process flow from the purchase order all the way through the entire manufacturing process, you need to look at this process as a cohesive process, and you need to develop test scripts that test both the positive and the negative functionality, or the negative test case, if you will, of each of these processes. So our validation test scripts cover purchase order management, it covers master planning, production planning, all inventory management functionality and so forth are covered within our validation. So you may say, okay, that's what is covered, but what is not covered? In most ERP implementations, we typically do not explicitly validate the finance functionality. So therefore, in our validation toolkit, for example, you won't find an explicit test that covers the creation of a chart of accounts. But we do exercise the finance functionality in the process of developing integrated test scripts for the lean or the traditional manufacturing approaches within ERP. Next slide, please. So we talked a little bit about the validation toolkit, and as Mike discussed, I'm going to talk to you about the traditional way in which organizations validate an ERP system, and that would be the manual process. And then we'll talk a little bit about the green process, or the paperless version. And paperless validation is here. There are technologies that are available today that I'm going to quickly introduce you to that allow you to automatically create test scripts, automatically export those into IQ, OQ documentation, and then to execute those test scripts online and electronically sign using 21 CFR Part 11 signatures. So the validation toolkit is really a starting point for Dynamics AX, and it includes IQ, OQ, PQ templates and actual live test scripts. Fully written test scripts, for example, on the IQ side, that cover the beginning of the process from installing Windows all the way through installing the integrated components of the ERP system. And it includes best practice information, and it's all based on GAMP5. Next slide, please. So manually, you can actually use the toolkit as a starting point to accelerate your validation. With the validation toolkit comes a validation portal for AX 2012 that allows you to actually store all your validation documentation and develop a dashboard that tracks the progress of your validation exercises and all of the templates that you may collect for your validation throughout the life of the ERP system. Next slide, please. But then we get to automated validation testing, and this is where accelerating ERP validation begins. If you like to streamline the process of test script development and test execution, which happen to be the largest portion or the time-consuming portion, if you will, of validation, you're going to want to now start looking at automated tools to help you accelerate this process. So the product here that I'm just showing you a quick snapshot of is a product called Procedure Capture. And Procedure Capture, as the name implies, allows you to capture validation test procedures. It not only allows you to capture them, but it allows you to annotate the test scripts, store a test script library, and then more importantly, execute your test scripts and get all of your test results in a database. So if you look from the left-hand side of your screen to the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see what looks like a sheet of notebook paper. That is actually the test script that is being drafted. And you'll see that it's capturing a blow-up of whatever you clicked on. You'll notice some X's in the red X's in the screen there. Once I click through a procedure in the system, I can actually go ahead and draft my test script right online by filling out the description box. And you see it gives you a full blow-up of the screen, and it highlights in the middle of the screen exactly the area that you're clicking on so that the reader knows where they're going. On the left, or the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a validation test script library. We talked about validation as being perpetual. In other words, you have to maintain the validated state. In order to do that, you have to have a set of test scripts that are not only executable, but they are editable. This system allows you to edit the test scripts online and create a perpetual library of all of your test scripts. You can even play back the test scripts in a so-called movie mode to actually see the test script running on the screen. And it makes it a lot faster to conduct your review process, thereby accelerating validation. The green button at the top of the screen simply says Run. And when I'm in test environment, I can click the green button to execute the test script. And not only will the system execute the script, but if it encounters an issue, it tells you exactly the screen that it had an issue with, what it had an issue with, and produces a full validation summary report of all of the test script execution information, how long it took to execute the script, who executed the script, and you're allowed to electronically sign. The documents can be exported from the system, so no more cutting and pasting of screenshots. When you look at the old version of validation, and I've been doing validation for almost 30 years, when you look at the old way of doing it versus the green way or the paperless way of doing it, there's no more capturing screenshots. There's no more printing out endless copies of documents for review and signature. Review can be done online. It can be done quickly and easily by playing back the script as opposed to reading through a script, which makes it much faster. I can review a script in about a minute to a minute and a half using an automated test system as opposed to trying to read through the exact same script on paper. Automated validation testing is here, and the way we test ERP systems, especially lean and quality ERP systems, is using automated testing. Next slide.
Val, I've got a quick question for you.
Sure.
Along the validation lines here, and I'll move to the next slide here. But if the situation is that the ERP system is in the cloud, as opposed to being hosted on a server at the location, of the company, what does the customer have to do additionally or differently than if it is located and hosted, on their own servers?
That's an excellent question, Mike. And we deal with hosted systems, on-premise systems, and then a hybrid of those systems where some is hosted, some is actually on-site, a portion of the system is on-site, and a portion is hosted. For your host provider, you must make sure that they are SOC 1, Service Orientation Controls 1 and 2, compliant. SOC 1 and SOC 2 actually replaced SAS 70. SAS 70 used to be the standard for data centers, and it ensures that the data center is following quality processes in summary. So if you want to Google SOC 1 and SOC 2, that's the new standard for data centers. You also need to make sure that your data center really understands the principles of validation and change control. Validated systems must be under change control, and once the system is validated, it should be locked under change control. Most data center operations that are non-compliant or non-FDA regulated change software repeatedly. They add patches, they add major and minor updates to software and so forth. You need to make sure that the data center itself is following good quality processes. And what customers do is actually pass along their SOPs to be read and understood by the data center. But it's important that if you're going to be doing things in the cloud, that your cloud provider understands the principles of software validation in controlled IT environments.
Great. Thanks very much.
You bet. So that leads me to, Mike, my 7 habits of highly effective validation engineers. After validating ERP systems, particularly Microsoft Dynamics AX for the last 10 years, there's 7 habits that promote good and effective validation exercises as you validate an ERP system. The first thing is to plan and document everything. You probably heard the old adage, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. That definitely applies to validation. You also, number 2, want to understand the applicable regulations. For the med device regulations, it's 21 CFR 820.30 GMP, the 21 CFR 820.100 for CAPA, and so forth. The so-called quality system regulations apply. You need to know those regulations and understand their applicability to your ERP system. Number 3, you have to understand the validated systems environment. And Mike, you just asked the question of validating on-premise versus in the cloud. There is a difference when you're validating in the cloud and on-premise, and you need to understand those differences and incorporate those into your validation master plan. Number 4, you have to understand your internal processes. If I've seen ERP systems go off the rail, number 4 is the main reason why they go off the rail, because internal processes are not understood, and we're actually engineering the process on the fly as we're doing deployment. It's very important that you understand these processes and identify the gaps so that when you get to the validation exercise, your requirements are sound and you can conduct the validation in a more competent manner. Number 5, always conduct a risk assessment. GAMP 5 insists that a written risk assessment be conducted. It's not always whether or not you look at risk, but it's important that the risk be written. And in most of the audits that I've gone through recently with the FDA, written risk assessment. If you're not familiar with what your risk assessment should look like, you should get the GAMP 5 documentation, which provides an example of the risk assessment, or the validation toolkit, which includes a template for the risk assessment. Number 6, always obtain a commercial off-the-shelf supplier audit. If you're implementing commercial off-the-shelf software such as AX, you will need to understand that from a GAMP perspective, it's considered a Category 4 or a commercial off-the-shelf application. A supplier audit is mandatory. This is sometimes missed by organizations because they just consider suppliers as a part of their normal supplier process, and they don't do a quality supplier audit, which is really the key here. And number 7, the most obvious yet but most important, is ensure that all of your resources are trained on the validated system. The last few audits that I went through, the FDA absolutely asked for the training records. Not only do you have to ensure that your resources are trained, but the training has to be documented. So if you follow these 7 habits, you can ensure that you will have a good, compliant, audit-sustainable ERP a validated system at the end of the day. Next slide, please. So if you want to look at what the manual process of validation breeds versus the automated process yields high return, low cost, and low risk. Using the automated approach, some clients are seeing up to 60% decrease in the time it takes to deal with the scripts in terms of creating them. The system allows you 3 benefits in one: the ability to author, review, and approve. You can conduct your test scripts or testing exercise manual or automated, and you can export documents in your unique format, and that's very important because half the battle is actually creating the documents in your approved format. It gives you a greater ROI, but more importantly, it produces a very high level of validation testing due diligence. You not only have the movies that show the script running, but you actually have the test documentation as well, and your validation test scripts are editable and reusable. So the 21st century approach to ERP software validation is the automated approach. Although the manual approach is still legal, the automated approach brings much greater benefits, high return, low cost, and low risk. Mike?
Thanks, Val. One other question that came up, let's see, does the automated validation tool itself have to be validated?
That's an excellent question, and the answer to that is yes. The automated tool itself has to be validated because of the 21 CFR Part 11 requirement. You are electronically signing, and if you opt to use this functionality, you will have to validate the system itself. Some organizations use the electronic signature component and some don't. If you do use it, all 21 CFR Part 11 systems, as you know, have to be validated, so the automated system would be subject to validation. It's important to understand, however, that it doesn't change the software. So therefore, if the system is simply capturing screenshots and that's all the system is doing, the system therefore wouldn't need to be validated. But if it's going beyond that, allowing you to execute the scripts and to sign scripts, it does require validation.
All right, great. Thanks very much, Val.
Thanks, Mike.
See if I can get this to go right here. Okay, well, what we want to do is, and again, you know, it's mhull, H-U-L-L, mhull at eBECS, E-B as in boy, E-C as in Charlie, S as in Sam, eBECS.com if you have a question. But what I'd like to do at this point is just kind of wrap it all up. What we've been talking about are the concepts of validation, quality, and lean manufacturing mix in an implementation plan. So what I wanted to do next was just to take a look at a typical ERP implementation plan, and then just have the three of us just talk a little bit about when do you have to think about these issues inside of an implementation plan. And as you can see here on the chart, there's a diagnostic up front that probably goes a little bit with your sales selection cycle. There's an analysis that happens. There's a scope inside of analysis. Then you create a design of the product. But the design and the analysis are two really key components in an ERP solution, because it's kind of like Yogi Berra said one time, you know, we're lost but we're making great time. You need to have a very clear design and where you're going. So the analysis and design are very important. And then you've got development, deployment, and operation to go live. So that's your typical ERP implementation, you know, map, let's call it. But the question is when do you plan the issues we've been talking about today? So Val, if you could just take a minute or two just to talk a little bit about, you know, where would you actually, as you're sitting down and thinking through the ERP implementation, where would you consider validation and FDA compliance?
That's an excellent question, Mike. You would consider validation at the very beginning of the project. Validation activities and planning activities must start at the beginning of the project, and at each of the stages that you've highlighted there, diagnostics, analysis, design, development, validation document deliverables are produced. So validation goes across and is parallel to the implementation lifecycle.
Okay. Great, thanks very much. Tim, what are your thoughts in terms of, you know, as you're looking at quality standards and looking at supporting quality processes, when should people be thinking about those as they're planning and executing on an ERP implementation?
Well, we, very similar to what Valerie says, we're going to start off at the beginning, analyzing the quality needs, and then following the same structure pretty much you have here from the design, development, and so forth. One thing that is a little different is we're going to want the manufacturing structure design put in place first, because quality is going to be a result of how we buy products, how we manufacture products, and how we sell products, and how we support products. So we really want those in place first, those design methods put in play first, and then we'll come in with the design process as to how we maintain the way we build and the way we sell products after that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tim. And lastly, I hope I'm going to basically repeat what Valerie and Tim both said. When you're looking at an ERP implementation from the vantage point of a lean manufacturer, getting in up front during the selection process is absolutely key. The lean team just needs to be in that completely, because you're looking at acquiring a new system that's going to support your business processes. And if you're betting the farm on lean thinking, you definitely need to have a product and an implementation partner that think that way. And then into the diagnostic analysis, this mixed model just has to be planned. You don't want to push it into phase 2, because then what ends up happening is that people on the shop floor, manufacturing floor, they just get confused because they're taught two different ways of getting done the same, the type of manufacturing they're doing. So it just creates a little bit of confusion and then creates expense later on. So it's best to consider it all up front and consider the end from the beginning, and then as you plan it into your whole process, so that the mixed model of traditional and lean processes is planned from the beginning, it's tested, it's developed, etc. And then when you go live, you're going live on your actual system as it exists today. So I hope that that's kind of what you've heard from both Valerie, Tim, and myself, is that these are 3 real essential, critical, mission-critical areas to consider, and they should be considered both in your selection of an ERP product and a vendor to help you implement it, and then also during the actual project itself, from the planning through the execution, that each one of these issues, validation, quality, and then if you are lean, your lean manufacturing processes need to be part of it every step of the way. So I don't have any other questions that have come in through email. I really thank you very much for all of your attentiveness and for being here with us today. Valerie, thank you very much for all your thoughts on validation.
My pleasure.
And Tim, thank you very much for being part of this and lending your expertise in the whole area of quality.
Thank you very much.
So we've talked about the typical medical device ERP challenges today. And bottom thing there is just getting it all to work inside of one ERP solution. We will follow up with you on any other questions or comments you may, just so you can ask questions or comments with us. We'll follow up one-on-one. And if you'd want to have a further discussion on any of these issues, we'd be happy to do that, and I can arrange that with Val, Tim, or myself. But with that, I will adjourn the meeting, and thank you again very much for being here with us.